This is a transvenous pacing wire. So this wire gets inserted into the right ventricle. And so usually what we'll do is we will place a sheath into usually the neck, and then we will insert this catheter through the sheath. Once the catheter clears the sheath, we will inflate the balloon. So you can see it's got a syringe that is connected and will inflate the balloon. So once the catheter clears the sheath, we inflate the balloon, and it holds about 1.5 mils of air, and then we can keep that inflated and get the catheter floated to the right ventricle. And then you want to make sure once you get in position that that balloon is deflated. And again, it holds 1.5 mils of air. So the tip will sit in the right ventricle, and it will pace. A pacing stimulus will be sent through this bipolar lead to the right ventricular muscle. So what will happen is the right ventricle will depolarize, and then it waves across to the left ventricle. So you know you're paced because your QRS is wide. That's how you know you're paced. And then I wanted to just kind of point out that this is a bipolar pacing lead. These are pretty common and used more frequently than unipolar leads. But the signal, the electrical stimulus literally travels from here to here. So sometimes one of the challenges is you don't always see pacing spikes. So you've got to look for that wide QRS. Another thing I want to point out is on the catheter, just like a PA catheter, there are markings. So we'll start at the tip. So this is, again, going to sit in the right ventricle. And then we'll move backward. And it's so hard to see. It's like black on green. But you can see this is 20 centimeters. 3 marks is 30 centimeters. 4 marks is 40 centimeters, etc. And most patients, depending on their height, the catheter may exit the sheath at about, I don't know, it depends on how tall they are, but like 35-ish up to 40 centimeter mark or so. So somewhere in that ballpark. And then these are the electrodes that get connected to your pacemaker, so your pacing generator. And the negative distal lead is the one that actually does the pacing. So you just need to make sure they're attached to the appropriate poles. And you know, one thing I would just say is just make sure, I usually use this to tape. I tape the bejesus out of this to the patient's shoulder just to secure it so that this wire doesn't accidentally get pulled out. And then same thing like with a PA catheter, you want to use what we call it a swandom, you know, when we put a PA catheter in, but you want to make sure that the protective sheath goes on before you insert the catheter through the introducer. So pretty easy. Again, this is meant for emergent pacing, usually used pretty short term, but this will sit in the right ventricle, and the type of pacing we will do is VVI pacing. We're going to pace the ventricle, we're going to sense the ventricle, and then inhibit pacing if the patient has their own intrinsic rhythm. So that's just a quick down and dirty on right ventricular emergent pacing. Hope you enjoyed this. Okay, there we go.